Alright, welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and the Plastic Models for Beginners Back to Basics Tamiya 2.5 ton 6x6 cargo truck. So we left off on step 9. That is complete with the exception of not putting the wheels on because I want to do those after I do some of the painting and weathering. And that includes the spare, so those won't be going on just yet. So the next part is step 10, which is the start working on the cab. And the first part of that is the seats. So we need D8, and then we need A12, 2 of those. There and there. Get those cleaned up a little bit. Now I'm going to do the same thing on this that I did with some of those other parts, since the molding edge is right here. I'm going to smooth those out a little bit. Probably not real necessary being inside of the cab, but do it anyway because I don't want any weird stuff showing up. During painting or weathering. Alright, and then I'm gonna make sure these are smoothed out really well. Like that. Then get this here. And then cement these in place. I could have painted these separately, since this is going to be the body color olive drab, and then these are going to be like canvas. They're actually calling for, yeah, khaki. But I'll just I'll spray those, but I'll tape them off. Getting close to this point where we're going to have to do some painting, especially on this interior. But we'll get as much put together as we can. Set that aside, and then we need the floorboard, which is D16. And we need B37, which is the steering column. Then we need C3, 4, 5, and 14. Three, 4, 5, and 14. And these will, I'll glue all these in place and then detail paint them in place after I spray the primary color on it, just because I like to have a nice bare plastic surface for cement. A lot of people like to, you know, and I've done it too, but cement with paint in place or try and scrape some of it off, and it generally works pretty good, but for me, I found that it just doesn't quite seem to have as strong a bond as if it's just bare plastic. So I try to do it whenever I can. A lot of people will completely paint a kit inside and out, or build a kit inside and out and then paint it. And I have done that, you know, just on a complete exterior. I mean, I would never attempt the interior because that'd be crazy. I'd never be able to do that, but it can be done. Completely paint everything, or completely assemble everything, then paint it. So you might experiment with that because you might find it's easier to do it one way over another. I do kind of a combination of both. Paint some stuff in place, some stuff I paint before I assemble it. Just depends on what it is. And you will learn that kind of thing as you go. Okay, so we got that. Steering column. Gotta be careful cleaning these parts up because they're pretty I don't want to say flimsy, but they're pretty delicate. Being so thin and all. Some of the stuff you may not even see, but it's best not to take the chance and leave it and have it show up later. Steering column. Find it's easier to cut this stuff off close. It's off. Sometimes it's better on, but for stuff like this, I generally try and cut it off completely and then use my finger to brace it while I'm cutting. A little tiny leftover piece of sprue gate off of there. And really pay attention to the knobs because, you know, that's one of those things that's it's pretty easy to see once it's painted and weathered. It may look pretty good. Once you get it painted and weathered, you'll see that little seam if you're not careful. Alright, so we got all that. So let's cement them all in place. Alright, so let's do C5 first, since that's a little tiny part. And it goes whoops. Oops, can't do it that way. It's not open underneath. Okay, we got that one. Make sure that's the right way. This one here, make sure you do it the right direction. And make sure you clean the stuff off before you glue it in position, which I almost forgot to do. And there is a front and back to this part. There's like a lever on the downward side right there. That goes forward. So just make sure you get that going the right direction. And even if you did mess it up and do it the wrong direction, I'd be willing to bet not many people would notice. Alright, and then, oops. That one there. Alright, so there's all the controls. Then, this part here goes right there. Got a little bit of burring going on here, so I need to get that cleaned out, or else it's not going to fit in that firewall like it's supposed to, or the floor like it's supposed to. Alright, just like that. So what I'm going to do, I might clip this on here while this stuff's drying so it doesn't bounce around. Okay, and then need part D3. Which goes right, whoops, right there like that. This one doesn't fit as precisely, so keep in mind if you really needed to later, you could adjust it and make sure that you put it the right direction, which I almost didn't. There we go. Oh yeah, it fits really good now. Right there in the middle first. That looks pretty good. Alright, so that takes care of 10 and 11. I'm going to wait on the steering wheel till I see how Mr. Driver fits. Probably put that on after I put him into position. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cut out his body and see how it fits, so I can make any adjustments I might need to now. Just kind of get this cut off roughly. So, in my zeal, I glued this piece in upside down. Man, goes to show you. That's why you should never panic. Things can always be fixed. There we go. Yeah, that steering column looked like it was pretty laid back. It wasn't fitting on there really upright, and there we go, upright enough for the driver to get that stern wheel. So there we go, that's better. And now, see that again. That's why it's best to check this stuff early, because it can still be fixed, especially when you've just cemented something, because with a little bit more of your cement you can break a part loose without damaging it, at least not too bad. In a case like this, there wasn't really anything to damage. Alright, so that's more like it. Now we'll be able to fit the steering wheel in there. Alrighty then. Excelente, as they say. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and cement these seats in because I'll be able to tape them off to paint the seats after I paint the base color. Alright, so that is steps 11, 10, and 11 are now complete. Alright, so step 12 is where the back and the sides are installed, as well as the rifles and the dashboard. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to prep all these parts in this step for interior painting. I'm not going to worry about the outside, I'm going to worry about the inside of all these parts and the you know, the floorboard and benches and the dashboard. I'm going to get all that stuff ready to paint before I assemble it, because I think it'd be too hard to paint the inside effectively with all those parts in place. So I'm going to get all that stuff ready and then we'll paint it. Okay, so let me show you real quick what I'm talking about as far as painting. If I were to assemble all this, I could spray the inside of this, but it'd be kind of tough and it'd be really hard to get down inside of here, and that's just not, that dog ain't gonna hunt. So I am going to go ahead and do like I said and get all this stuff ready to prime and paint. Okay, I've got everything taped off the way I want, so I can shoot some primer on here. And on this I'm going to be mainly focusing on the inside and then these parts here, the portions you can see. And I'm using Stynylrez gray. The reason I'm using gray is because I want some contrast with this darker green color here. I normally use black, but I want to use gray this time, since there's going to be like some corners and junk like that I want to make sure I get. So one quick tip on this Stynylrez primer: make sure you shake this stuff up really well. When you get it done, you're not. This is one of those cases when something like this is really handy. Get it down in there. When I put it down into the bottle and I turned it on, it was almost bogging the thing down because so much of the primer pigment, or whatever it is, was settled in the bottom. And then once I got that mixed up really well, then I shook it like tarnation. Just really want it to be mixed up. Number one, so it'll spray like it's supposed to, and so as you use the bottle, you don't end up with you know, really thick goopy stuff at the bottom you can't even use. So it's not going to take very much, so I'm not going to put a bunch in here because this stuff goes quite a ways. Just about that much. We'll see how that lasts. And then I like to keep a Q-tip handy, cotton bud, whatever you want to call it, in case I need to clean the tip. It's usually not a problem with this stuff, but I haven't used the gray very much, so I can't really remember how this will work. So, and I'm using my Iwata HPM2. That's what I generally use for base coats and for primer. So now, one thing to remember about Stynylrez, and I saw a thread today on a forum where somebody was talking about putting the Stynylrez on, and it looked horrible when he put it on there, just really gloppy looking and just speckly and lumpy and just really horrible. Well, as he discovered and he commented, Once this stuff dries, it looks really good. It's self-leveling, so it smooths out really well. So you don't have to worry about what it looks like. Just, you know, you be careful, don't put too much on at once. But in the end, if you're careful, if you don't like way overdo it, it will definitely look really good. There's even some people that are hardcore anti-acrylic product people that actually like this for certain applications. Okay, that looks pretty good, so I'm going to set that aside. Check how much I can get. I got quite a bit left there. Every once in a while I close off my my airbrush and just blow any droplets that have formed on the ends. And as you can see, I've got a lot of stuff taped off here. Now these rifle and rifle holders. The back of the rifle holder, the part that's stuck to the tape, actually is in the back. It glues to the back of the thing, I believe, so you can't see it, so I'm not going to have to worry about painting that other side. But as you can see, I've got some tape right there and all over here. That's all the contact points for the cement. And as I mentioned in some of my earlier videos, I really like to keep it clean. Free of paint, just because it seems to stick a little bit better for me. Yep, still got quite a bit in there. See, it doesn't take much. Whoa. Alright, and just check this one more time, get a little bit more up underneath there. Alright, so that looks pretty good. So those are all painted up, so I'm going to clean this thing out and not bore you with that, and then once this cures up, then we can come back and start putting it together, or come back and paint it, sorry. Alright, I'm going to spray these parts here with olive drab, and I'm using Tamiya XF62. But as you can see, I've also got some X22 clear, and then my X20 thinner. Now, what I like to do, and this isn't totally necessary, and a lot of people don't, you know, really do it, or find it necessary to have a gloss coat for some things, but for me, I just like. Since the Tamiya paint is really super flat, I just don't have that much luck when I'm using washes and stuff. So what I like to do is I like to mix up the color, whatever color I'm using, with clear, and then some thinner, you know, for the airbrush. And generally what I do, it's not any kind of magic potion or anything, but I generally do equal parts of the color, of clear, and thinner. So for instance, and I like these little bottles here. I bought these, I can't remember where I bought them from, but they're made by Tamiya, or you know, at least packaged by Tamiya, and they work really well. They're nice bottles. They're good for mixing colors up for projects. But anyway, so I'm gonna do let's start out with 1/2 mil. Yeah, that's not gonna be enough, so I'm gonna do there's 1, and let's go with 2. And then where's my, there it is. And then I'm gonna go with 2 on the clear as well. And what this does, it just kind of makes it kind of a semi-gloss. So it takes my washes a little bit better. I put the caps on these because I don't want to spill them. And I don't want to just spray a total clear on it, because this gives it kind of a, like I said, like a semi-gloss kind of look to it. And then 2 mil of thinner. And that'll give me a good amount. I'll even be able to paint some of the stuff on the outside. And another thing I like to do is keep my thinner pipette separate from the paint ones. I reuse the paint ones, but you know, I like to keep this one by itself all the time. And then once I've got it all mixed up, I'm ready to paint. So I already painted, or I already showed you what I do as far as painting and on the what do you call that stuff? The primer. So I'm not gonna show you the actual painting. It's just the same thing as spraying the primer, except I'll go with lighter coats and go over it twice. Okay, so I'm going to do that and then come back. All right, that's all dried, and I've got the seats taped off. So I'm going to use some XF49, which is buff, or not buff, khaki. Almost used buff when I'm not supposed to. And spray these seat cushions. What's this you say? A different airbrush? Yes, it is. It's my other airbrush. I hardly ever use it, and I thought I'd give it a shot here. This one I find amazingly hard to control because this little trigger, that's why I don't use it much. Well, if I don't use it at all anymore. It's very, very difficult. I don't have the manual dexterity I once did. It's just kind of hard. So I'm going to spray that up real quick and then come back. All right, I got the seats painted. So the next part is I'm going to do the decals for the dashboard. So I've already got one cut out, put it in some water, and it is number 12 here that goes right above the instrument cluster. So I'm going to let that soak for a second and then actually put it in place right here where you can see this little indentation. Alright, the decal's loose. So the first thing I do is using the Mark Fit decal solution. I get a very little bit, just enough to kind of float the decal on, put a little bit where the decal is going to go, and then sometimes I use a knife, sometimes I use a toothpick, and just slide it off into position, and then make sure it's lined up. Put a little bit of this stuff on there again. Then use a Q-tip and kind of smash it into place. Now if it's not lined up exactly like you want it, just move it around a little bit, and you can see a little bit of silvering going on on the edge. It's all right, because once that Mark Fit sits up a little bit, I'm going to be using the real deal and using my Walters Solvaset. Now that stuff really dissolves decals. So that's basically it. So I'm going to let it sit there for a minute. I'm going to go ahead and put these other decals on, and then I'll show you how I'm going to take care of the dials. Then we'll do the Solvaset. Okay, so I've got the decals finished up, and they look pretty good. What I did, I don't know if I covered in that last little segment, but what I do is I take a straight edge and I cut as close as possible to the edge of the color, and then on the end where I'm having to leave a little stub to hold my tweezers, I just score enough to cut through the decal film. So when I pull it off, when I pull the decal off, I just get rid of that little bit of film. And so if there is an edge on it, even a raised edge, it's along the actual edge of this decal, which is a metal plate anyway on these old vehicles like that. So that way, you know, it looks just a little more realistic. As for the dials, the way I took care of those is I took some of my Vallejo model wash and I thinned it down with some Vallejo thinner, because this stuff is pretty thick for a wash, and personally this is the only thing I found it good for. I can't get to work as a wash, so I use it for other things instead. I thinned it a little bit, and I just basically touched the tip of my brush. I used a very small brush. This one is it's called a number 1, but it's pretty stinking fine. And just touch it in there, and then let capillary action pull it in the whole dial, so the inside of the dial is filled in with black. And then normally I would take some silver or something, and I'd try and highlight, you know, around the edge of the bezel, around the instruments themselves, but in this case I'm not going to bother, because you wouldn't be able to see it anyway on the inside. So I did that, and then I got the rifles painted. I used Vallejo Model Air Armor Brown for the stocks, because the M1 rifle had a walnut stock on it in World War II, so I wanted to go with something kind of dark. And then for the metal portions, the barrel and then the trigger and floor plate and everything, I used NATO black. So with that, all the details are done painting and the decals are done, so I'm going to pull all these off of here. And I painted the knobs as well on the shift levers and stuff. So that's ready to go. So I'm going to peel all this off and start gluing it together. Okay, so I peeled all my tape off where I had it masked for gluing, and that is what I'm going to do now. So, starting with one side of the cab. That side glued on. Now, one thing to notice and to make sure you remember is, and I had to double check it, but your cab, the floor of your cab lines up on this groove here, not the bottom. I mean, it'd be a little bit easy to mix it up, but after monkeying around with it for a few minutes, it'd become obvious. So just make sure that's the groove you put it in. Alright, so we got that, and then we'll do the other side here. Now, some brands of kits I would be taping and test fitting and double test fitting and taping and mocking up a lot, just because, not necessarily because fit is bad, but it can be tricky and hard to line up all of the stuff. But fortunately, with the Tamiya kits, especially newer ones, it's not as big a deal. So just make, because this, this is fitting in here really nicely. Okay, so I got the sides in. Now I'm going to cement these edges here, where the sides meet the firewall there. Now, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but every time I use, and this is just a habit I've gotten into, but I'm always screwing the top on. I've never spilled the bottle yet, and I'll do it now for sure because I said that, but I always screw that lid on. I don't like to leave it loose. So that's just a little, another tip of the day. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Then, glue the back on. And let's see. Alright, as per the instructions, this ridge with the two little things on it, that faces down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the bottom first. Make sure there's some a little bit of foreign matter right there. Make sure that is bottomed out and in place. And I'll do the bottom first, and then I'll do the side so I can kind of hold that together. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then we've got this outside edge here. Ooh, and it's beveled, so be careful. Squeeze it too hard, it'll pop out. Okay, hold that together for a minute, for a few seconds I should say. A minute, that's kind of long. All right, so then I'm going to put the dashboard in place. Fits right there like that. Make sure it's bottomed out. Need a cement there. Onto there. Make sure it's pressed down. Okay. And these fit down in there like that. Whoa. Okay, those are in place. And then the last thing for step 12 is, whoops, a radiator. Okay, and it bottoms out on these two little angle parts right here. So it's kind of hard to misalign it. So hold that in place. Cement there, there. There and there. If you need to, if you feel like you need to, you can clamp that or whatever, but it should cure up pretty quick. So that concludes step number 12. So this video is getting kind of long. So now that we're done with 12, except for the driver and the steering wheel, which I'm going to put in later, so I can put them in together and make sure everything, you know, his arm lines up and all that kind of stuff. Going to call it quits on this video. So we're up to step 12. Next time we start on step 13, which is building up the outer portions of the cab, the engine side covers, the hood / bonnet, brush guard, fenders, all that kind of stuff. So we'll come back and do that next time. So as always, thank you for joining me here on Plastic Models by a Regular Dude. If you have any questions or comments, put them down below. Any suggestions if you've built this kit, whatever, I would appreciate it. So until next time, I will see you all later.